my esteemed friends on the dais, the promoters of this fantastic university, Vice Chancellor, members of the faculty, and above all, students. मुझे ये देख के आश्चर्य भी है और हर्ष भी है कि इतने लोग इतनी तादाद में इस ऑडिटोरियम में हैं और मुझे बताया गया कि इतनी ही तादाद में इसके ऊपर एक ऑडिटोरियम में और इसके नीचे एक और ऑडिटोरियम में है। आश्चर्य इसलिए हुआ कि इससे ज़्यादा रोचक, इससे ज़्यादा मनोरंजन, इससे ज़्यादा हास्य, इससे ज़्यादा दुखद प्रसंग आपको इस कानूनी ड्राई सब्जेक्ट से ज़्यादा राजनीति में मिलेंगे, ख़ास तौर से आज। उसके बावजूद आप लोग बाहर नहीं हैं और आप इस विषय को सुनने आए हैं। मैं समझता हूँ ये एक अच्छी चीज़ दर्शाता है। और एक बात तो पक्की है कि नंबर आपको सिर्फ यही पढ़ाई लिखाई करके मिलेंगे, वो बाहर वाले टॉपिक को सुन के नहीं मिलेंगे। Friends, it is actually, I am so happy in fact that you have chosen to have a dialogue on a subject which is largely non-political, and I certainly intend to make it completely apolitical. It's a subject which is important because it brings to the fore a very interesting contradiction amongst many contradictions of India. We have, I would say, having spent a lifetime in that area, clearly the most amazing legal system. The best and the brightest in the bar and the bench across the whole world are available in India. Our judges are some of the finest. Our lawyers are actually some of the finest. The doctrines of law which Indian law, constitutional law and otherwise have evolved are avant-garde, cutting-edge frontier theories where we were pioneers. Basic structure, for example. Who could imagine that you would be able to hold a constitutional amendment itself to be unconstitutional? That is an Indian gift to the world. PIL, again, an entirely Indian genius. Judicial review, which is more encompassing, more enveloping, more dynamic, more aggressive than any other jurisdiction that I can think of. It makes all other jurisdictions, common law or non-common law, pale into insignificance. And yet, with such a remarkable structure, of which you should be rightly proud, we simultaneously have to hang our heads in shame. Why? And we have to hang our heads in shame, friends, because of that problem of not being able to beat the backlog of this ever-present, never-ending arrears problem, pendency of cases which sound mind-boggling to foreign audiences, roughly 3 crores across the length and breadth of the 3 or 4 tiered system of the judicial system in our country. And this contradiction is what has to be resolved sometime. Before I come to the nitty-gritty, and I always believe in telling you in very, very plain words. As they said, sometimes words have to be assault on the senses for reform to take place. Before I come to concrete suggestions as well, I must read out a nice passage which more than 30-40 years, India's foremost jurist, a gift of God to us, had this to say. And he was a great nationalist. What he said, which I'm going to read now, might sound like an insult to this country. But here was a nationalist speaking the truth. And unless we realize the problem we will never be able to solve it. Nani Palkiwala said decades ago, quote, "May I turn to the situation in India, which has the second largest number of lawyers in the world. While it is true that justice should be blind, in our country it also appears to be lame. It barely manages to hobble along. The law may or may not be an ass, but in India, it is certainly a snail. It moves at a pace which would be regarded as unduly slow in a community of snails. A lawsuit once started in India is the nearest thing to eternal life ever seen on this earth. Some have said that litigation in India is a form of fairly harmless entertainment. But if so, it seems a very dangerous way of keeping the citizenry amused. If litigation were to be included in the next Olympics, India would be quite certain of winning at least one gold medal, unquote. This is the lament, this is the pain, this is the torture of our system. And yet, as I delve into this subject, something on which I've been speaking myself for decades and have written about, I always find I'm always awestruck by the enormous inefficiencies and tardiness of the Indian legal system on the one hand, and yet the fact that it is matched by the remarkable simplicity of the solutions which can actually solve it. And that is what causes me even more pain. It is truly, as Benjamin Franklin said, for want of a horseshoe nail, a battle could not be fought, and therefore a kingdom was lost. And many of the issues we're going to discuss shortly are really horseshoe nail issues. Those protruding nails, those unfixed nails can so easily be fixed, but sadly remain protruding, demolishing this proud legal system, of which many of you are hopefully going to be members in the near future. But before I come to the nitty-gritty, let me make 6 or 7 general points. The general points are important. The first is the fact that despite this being a major problem, I find that administration of justice is still largely not a taught subject in universities. I'm not sure whether it is here, but I've been speaking on this for 10 years, 20 years, and some universities have taken heed. But as a taught subject, as a semester course, the very concept of the whole monolith which we call the administration of the justice system, I don't find is there in many universities. I've been on some of the boards, my hometown Gujarat, Jodhpur, the National University and other universities. Not really, they tried, but they haven't really come down to having a full-time semester course. I think it's very important to sensitize young minds from an early point onwards that management of the legal system is as, if not much more important than the doctrines of law which you learn. Second, the scourge of backlog can and must be met only by less talk and more action, by fewer lectures and by more implementation, by less legislation and more ground achievement. Because the sad truth is, friends, that neither the problem is new nor the solutions are new. We all know the problem and we know the solution even better. It's a question of the willpower, the focus, the determination of applying nitty-gritty small solutions consistently without change over 5 years alone will start showing difference. Third, the mammoth figure of arrears thrown at us should not be seen as either a deterrent or a depressant. If you look closely, they are nothing but a pack of cards. If you attack them carefully, they will fold up and fall down like a pack of cards. Fourthly, and I always believe in this maxim, Thomas Hardy's famous words, if all of us take care of the small things, the big things will take care of themselves. One of the problems is we don't take care of the small things and we only talk of the big things. Fifthly, the approach to solution of this arrears problem, and I'm going to give you concrete solutions shortly, has to be holistic, not piecemeal. It has to be multi-pronged. So it has to be both preventive and curative. It has to be all-inclusive. It is because we do patchy work that the problem doesn't get solved or the results do not show. And sixthly, it has to be bold, unconventional. New fashionable word is surgical. It has to jolt us out of our somnolence. It has to change the system because there are a lot of stakeholders in the system which it helps, and they don't mind if the system chugs along indefinitely. It is therefore time to be blunt and not diplomatic. And lastly, but probably the most important, it has to be an attitudinal change. Friends, we must never underestimate the importance of attitudinal change. It is the most non-quantitative, the most non-specific, the most non-numeric, but it is usually the most effective. And I'll give you a small example very quickly. In 1993, I was privileged to be part of a Supreme Court ADR project. Justice Ahmadi, Chief Justice then, had started it, and we studied the Californian model, which is the most successful model for ADR. ADR is a way of unclogging your legal arteries, of taking matters out of the clogged legal arteries and subjecting them to alternative dispute resolutions. And we gave a report which ultimately, I had written most of that report, became Section 82 of the Civil Procedure Code, which today gives you a menu card of alternative methods of dispute resolution, including, of course, arbitration, conciliation, mediation, lok adalat, etc., etc. But in 1993 to 1996, we did a mini pilot based on that at the Supreme Court. And that mini pilot led to an attitudinal change. So all the stakeholders, registry officials, judges, litigants, lawyers, clients, clerks, they all realized that you had to stick to a time. And since then, the Supreme Court arrears have come down from roughly 1,50,000 to roughly 50,000. It keeps varying from 60 to 45. But there has been a significant attitudinal change. So, last but not the least, in this war on arrears, the entire judiciary has to be seen as one holistic machine. The Supreme Court, of course, has to act as a facilitator, as a catalyst, as an organizer. But they have to lead by example, they have to be mentors. But the whole system has to move together. Friends, what is the first head of this solution? It's so simple that I feel embarrassed discussing it with you. How can you have wonderful buildings of hospitals, wonderful machines inside hospitals and no doctors? Can any medical facility work without doctors? Well, in India, let me give you two statistics which will shock you. From independence till today, on an average, of course, we have in this country of 1.25 billion, possibly a litigating population of about, 300 million, 200 million. We have all of 1,100 High Court judges. Of those 1,100, at any point of time in the last 72, 73 years of the Indian Republic, roughly 1/3 of the seats have been vacant. Roughly. Sometimes 25% is vacant, sometimes 40% is vacant, but on an average. Now can you imagine that we give lecture, I give you a lecture about arrears, and you have 1/3 of seats vacant of High Court judges, out of only 1,100 odd seats in the whole country. Second statistic. Similarly, out of the approximately 22 odd thousand seats of the entire lower judiciary, roughly 33% have always been vacant. I'm sorry, roughly 25%, 33 is for the High Court, 25% for the lower judiciary has always been vacant at any point of time. The Supreme Court has given directions, it has given mandamuses, it has hauled up for contempt since the early 2000s, saying, increase the judge per million population ratio of India. Do you know what it was earlier? It was 10 point something or 11. By constant shouting of the Supreme Court, it has crawled, literally crawled over 15 years to something like 18 or 19. The correct ratio, people believe minimally, is 33 judges per million of population. In USA, it is 50 judges per million of population. But we'll be quite happy with 33 to 35. It just doesn't move. It just doesn't happen. On the contrary, what does happen is that when seats fall vacant, the successor is appointed after huge delays. The seat lies vacant indefinitely. In a more lighter vein, I wrote more than 15 years ago that the only way to check this, of course in a lighter vein, is that when when an incumbent is about to retire, the rule should be that if his successor is not appointed before his retirement, then that chap's retirement age should be automatically extended. and he should continue in the seat. But the problem with India is, if you have that rule, all incumbents would continue indefinitely in their seats without ever retiring. As I said, I am going to make this strictly non-political, but truth has to be told, and this is true of all governments. It may be true in larger or lesser degree with that government or this government. And that is this very strange thing, and I put the blame, mind you friends, squarely and firstly at the Supreme Court door. The Supreme Court can't have it both ways. It cannot arrogate to itself the entire power of judicial appointments and then lament that 1/3 or 1/4 are always vacant. The so-called collegium system transferred this power to the collegium more than 30 years ago. And therefore the primary blame must lie at the gates of the Supreme Court for not filling up these vacancies in time. But here's the nuance. When the court does fill up in time and does make a recommendation on the collegium system, there is equally no warrant for a government to delay it. The rule is very clear in at least 3 9-judge judgments. And the rule is, if you refer to the government has one chance, as the Rajya Sabha does for a money bill, koi the Lok Sabha, to return it back to the government, saying, please reconsider your recommendation, return it back to the Supreme Court, saying, please reconsider your recommendation. But if the Supreme Court reiterates it, the government is obliged to appoint that appointee or the recommendee immediately. Now that has not happened in innumerable cases. And again the blame lies squarely at the door of the Supreme Court. Consider, if a Supreme Court recommended this person A as a judge, the matter went through the collegium to the government, whoever the government is, whatever the political color. If that government returns the name with objections and the collegium finds it fit to re-recommend that name again, then there cannot be a day's delay because the government has no power to delay. But has the Supreme Court of India issued a single notice of contempt? They have to issue one notice of contempt to the Law Secretary of India, and I don't mean this Law Secretary or that Law Secretary, saying why is our re-recommendation being delayed, and the whole thing will end. We'll start having appointments done immediately. But nobody has done it in 72, 73 years. And that is why you continue to have this huge problem of vacancies, of seats vacant, of retirees, of recommendations made, and yet recommendations not implemented, and seats continuing to go a-begging. The financial lament is partly true, but largely illusory. It is actually perhaps crocodile tears. Studies have found that yes, for a long time the judiciary was not part of planned expenditure. Now of course we have no planning commission, so we don't have planned expenditure in the old sense. But the allocation to the judicial system still remains very low. It has crawled up from the 9th plan of 0.071% of the planned expenditure to very little, and something like 1 point something, which is very low for judiciary. That must be increased. But the funny part is that studies show that a large amount of the money allocated is not utilized by the time of lapse. I don't have time to read out the figures to you, but almost varying from state to state, 1/3 to 2/3, that is 33%, 50% or 66% of the money actually allocated. For example, for fast-track courts, for lok adalats, for legal aid, for judicial academy, blah, 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 is not actually utilized. So the lament of an underfunded judiciary may well be an illusory excuse by all stakeholders. And I think there again you must make sure there is full utilization, quick utilization, and within time utilization. It's also sad because all this relates to appointment of judges. And without judges appointed in time, you will have 3 crore arrears pending in this country for as long as you and I live. It is sad equally that you have still not, directly under my nose and your noses for the last 4 years, not finalized a memorandum of procedure. Namely, the collegium of the Supreme Court has required a memorandum of procedure for appointment of judges to be finalized between the executive government and the judicial system. For 4 years, it's been footballed and shuttlecocked back and forth, and there is no agreement, and it is just now lying forgotten. This shows that people give lectures and speeches, but nobody is interested in nitty-gritty reform. Friends, another suggestion, and I must say how funny it is that I am giving such obvious suggestions. But as somebody said, sometimes the obvious has to be restated, because it's the obvious we are not doing. There is an Article 224A in the Indian Constitution. It was enacted some 40-50 years ago, in the 60s, specially inserted. Do you know what 224A is? It provides for appointment of ad hoc judges. An ad hoc judge means that Supreme Court, a person who has retired from Supreme Court can again be appointed to Supreme Court for a short period. In the High Court, a Chief Justice of a High Court can appoint any retired High Court judge of that High Court, but he can also, with central government concurrence, appoint judges of another High Court to that High Court. Why was this created? It was created because there is a large pool of simple, anonymous, hard-working judges who may retire, and as you know, retirement age is abysmally low in our country, 62 years, who don't want any prestige or power, but they can come back and spend another 3 years dealing with 1950s and 70s criminal appeals. They can sit and finish all your land acquisition matters. They can sit and do some child cases. Well, they are trusted and tried material because they've already been on the bench. You don't have to fight for reappointment, for collegium, for selection. But astonishingly, I can't think of a single case, and this is truly astonishing, in 73 years, of a 224A power being exercised at the High Court level. There are about 4 or 5 such ad hoc judges appointed in the Supreme Court. Justice K.J. Reddy in my time, Justice Ojha from Madhya Pradesh in our time. That too, in the entire 72 years, some 5 or 6 examples. In the High Courts, not a single example. And as you know, High Courts have on an average got a 33% vacancy. अरे भाई, अगर आप नए जजेस को चयन नहीं कर सकते, नियुक्त नहीं कर सकते, तो कम से कम पुराने जो आपके सिस्टम के अंदर से निकल चुके हैं, जिन पे आपको विश्वास है, जिन्होंने अपना उत्तरदायित्व सही रूप से निभाया है, तो कम से कम उनको तो एड हॉक जज आप बना सकते हो 2-3 सालों के लिए. There is a very nice small example which you should know in England. Senior counsel like us and my friend there can and do take up for 1 or 2 years the post of recorder. A recorder is a senior counsel who becomes a judge temporarily for 2-3 years. Now, recorders in England dispose of lakhs of cases of motor vehicle claims, जो छोटे-छोटे cases होते हैं. Now, we have systems, but we don't use them. Also, I think it's important to do, as somebody said, war is too serious to be left to generals. The management of war has to be left to management experts. Litigation and administration of law is too serious to be left to judges and lawyers. It requires management experts, because management experts can find out statistically trends. For example, trends will show that in this High Court you must have twice the number of judges doing criminal work than civil work, because the number of criminal works are 2 times more than the civil works. Yet, in a mechanical manner, the same number of judges deal civil and criminal. In another district court, the ratio may be the reverse. Now, this is done and can be done only by a use of information as a weapon. And information as a weapon, of course, has started now. Somebody mentioned, I think one of the bright students just now mentioned the National Judicial Grid, which means, it's a very nice concept. Each judge is supposed to upload his work every day on a daily real-time basis on a National Judicial Grid, and all the big bosses can come and see that and know your progress. But do you know the truth? The truth is interesting about, I think this is about, yes, January 25, 2018. I have it right here on my iPad. The number of courts which are not uploading, despite a mandamus and rule of law requiring it, is alarmingly high. There are 184 courts in the whole study was published. They don't do it. They don't upload it because probably it's too embarrassing. or too scared for the individual judge and court. Gujarat 184 courts don't do it, Telangana 124 don't do it, Rajasthan, my home state, 68 don't do it, Kerala 64 don't do it, Tamil Nadu 61 don't do it. So the whole chart. So out of thousands of courts, some 20% don't upload the grid. But it's a move in the right direction. It should happen. I'm sure these things will improve and they will show effect if you pursue them relentlessly. I think I've got about 10 minutes more left. More than 10 minutes perhaps. So let me just come to 2 or 3 other things very quickly and then wind up. We are also somehow romantically involved with old notions of origin, legacy, history, tradition. So for example, a simple thing like computerization, which we all understand, which will at the press of a button give you a picture across the country. How many writ petitions pending, how many POSCO cases pending, how many this subcategory of case pending, and therefore release more judges to attack that. Now that sounds so simple, but do you know that a writ petition, which is a very common word, is nomenclatured in 7-8 different ways in the different high courts in the country. So a writ petition is called XYZ in Bihar, it's called ABC in Delhi, it may be called JKL in Gujarat, and the same writ or the subject matter may be defined differently. One state may define it as land acquisition, the other may call it a writ petition. The result of this non-standardization, non-uniformity, is the obstruction to using information as a weapon, because you cannot get trends across the country, you cannot get aggregations, you cannot do analysis. Such a simple thing, but different high courts stick on. अरे हमारे ज़माने में 250 वर्ष पुराना हाई कोर्ट है, वहाँ पर इसको यही कहा जाता था, अब हम उसको बदलेंगे नहीं. So this is the mindset which has to change. It's the same. There was an attempt to make a compilation of uniform best practices from all the 30 odd high courts and the Supreme Court across India. A compilation was in fact made, but very few follow that uniform compilation because each person talks of his own history, his own legacy, his own origin and says, I am best, why should I change? So these are, as I said, Thomas Hardy said, you take care of the small things, the big things will take care of themselves. If you do all of these things together, you can imagine the synergical effect on areas. As I said, like a pack of cards. Well, 2 or 3 things more and I am done. One is, if you go apart from and beyond the legal system, you have to look at the ABCD of the judicial legal system. In my ABCD, A stands for access, B stands for backlog, C stands for cost, and D stands for delay. Now, on all these 4 fronts, we developed ADR, alternative dispute resolution. So one is, in a pipe or in your artery, how to make the blood flow faster. That's the problem of arrears. That's the problem of more judges, more techniques, more computerization. But equally, if your artery is clogged, there is another way of unclogging your artery by taking pending cases out of your artery into and subjecting them to external adjudication outside the legal system. That is known as ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. As I said, our committee's report led to a very useful section in the CPC, now for many decades, in 1997, called Section 82, which gives the menu card that you can subject all these matters to conciliation, mediation, lok adalat, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is that some of them are massively successful, no doubt. We have disposed of millions of cases by lok adalats. However, lok adalats have a limitation. They deal only with a particular narrow kind of case where they are very successful. Motor accident vehicle claims, a few kinds of land acquisition claims. But they are not ideal for so many other matters. There, our statistical rate has been abysmal. The first ADR, the first bypass to the heart disease of backlog was arbitration. Arbitration, unfortunately, is now called pre-litigation litigation. So it's a one more ladder to litigation. The other one, corporate settlement or settlement before filing, or after you lose at the first rung, what is known as pre-appellate settlement, has seen very poor success in India. When I did this study in California way back in 1993, I'll give you one telling, remarkable statistic. California is the home, the originator of ADR. It's where ADR was born. Less than 5% cases filed in California in the year of my study, 1993-1994, went to trial. That means 95% cases were settled in the pipeline. They never went to trial. That's how the system works. If 95% cases had to go to trial, the entire Californian judicial system would collapse. I suspect in our country, if not 95%, 85% of those cases go to trial. And with 33% understaffing of judges or 25% understaffing in the lower judiciary, there's no way in which any system can handle it. Friends, we have to now, there are many more examples I can give, and I will not give them because I'm sure there will be some small amount of interesting question answer. But the point as I end is this. You have to realize that our system is one of the best. People look at the world's largest democracy with great respect because it actually has a truly vibrant legal system. And yet simultaneously we hang our heads in shame. And therefore we have to fix this nail for which the battle could not be fought and for which the kingdom of zero arrears could not be won. Or agar, in this we have to also always consider, as Gandhi used to say, customer is king. Somehow in our system, sometimes the judge is the king, sometimes the lawyer is the king, sometimes somebody else is the king. But the litigant is very rarely the king. And for the arrears problem also, we have to enshrine this motto everywhere. Customer, namely litigant, is king. Then changes will happen. Otherwise, friends, as I end, that litigant, that customer will sit there in the very last row and mock at you. And he will say, दोपहर तक बिक गया शहर का हर झूठ और मैं अपना एक सच लेकर शाम तक बैठा रहा. That is not the kind of legal system we want. और इसीलिए इकबाल के शब्दों से मैं अंत करना चाहता हूं कि अगर आप जल्दी नहीं करेंगे, इसके बारे में अवेयर नहीं होंगे, एहसास नहीं होगा, दुख नहीं होगा, पीड़ा नहीं होगी, वेदना नहीं होगी, तो फिर इकबाल की बात पूरी तरह से लागू हम सब पर होगी. जज पे भी, वकील पे भी, लिटिगेंट पे भी, लॉयर पे भी, लॉ स्टूडेंट पे भी, लॉ टीचर पे भी, यूनिवर्सिटी पे भी. लम्हों ने खता की थी, सदियों ने सजा पाई. अगर आप ध्यान नहीं देंगे तो सदियां ऐसे करती ही रहेंगी, नींद कभी नहीं आएगी. थैंक यू.